What are the things that we would need to survive in the wilderness? Interestingly enough, they're the same things we would need anywhere else, even in town. Not counting air, we find that there are 5 things we need. Putting them together, we call them the survival priorities. The first priority is shelter. We could need shelter from several things, such as rain or cold, wind, and sun. Shelter is listed first because in most situations it will get colder at night, something that will happen within a few hours. Water is second because we could go a little over a day without water. Although most people first think of food when we ask the question, what do we need to survive? Food is actually last because we could go a couple weeks without food. Health concerns such as sanitation, safety, and other things you need to do to keep yourself healthy, such as getting adequate rest, and fire are in the middle because, depending on the situation, they may vary in actual importance and must therefore always be kept in mind. Fire, for instance, may be needed as a part of the shelter, may be needed to purify water or for cooking. And in any survival situation, we would always want to stay safe and healthy. You should memorize this list of survival priorities. Taking the idea of what we need to survive and the survival priorities further, we find several equipment item categories that are worth noting. Because they are based on the survival priorities, we will call these equipment categories survival priority equipment. The first 3 of these categories are based on shelter. They are clothing, which is body shelter, bedding, which is additional body shelter for sleeping during the colder nighttime hours, and a roof over your head structure type shelter. Water is the second priority, but in most cases you will also need a container to store and carry the water in. And in most situations nowadays, you also need some way to purify the water, such as a filter, chemicals, or a cook pot to boil the water in. The third priority is health concerns, and we have many hygiene items to meet these needs, such as a toothbrush, hairbrush, and toilet paper. And this might also include some sort of digging tool to dig a hole with to go to the bathroom in. Fire is the fourth priority, so you need some way to start a fire and to keep the fire going. The fifth priority is food, and you will also need a cook pot and utensils to cook the food in. In addition to the item categories that are more directly connected with the survival priorities, there are 4 tool categories that are also essential. The most important of these is cutting and chopping tools. You need both a knife that you can do fine cutting or whittling with, and a machete or tomahawk or hatchet or saw that you can do heavier woodworking with. We already mentioned some kind of digging tool. This can be useful for many things, such as leveling out a place for your shelter, digging fire pits and edible roots, as well as sanitation uses. The next category is cordage, such things as string, twine, and rope. Cordage is essential for many projects, lashing and tying them together. The final category is containers, to keep your gear together and organized, and of course a pack to carry it all in. Any of these items that you'd not already have with you, you would need to come up with from nature somehow. So these are the things you want to be sure and build your survival kit around. In addition to all the skills necessary to use these items, there is one other important skill we will mention here, that of direction finding. While direction finding can be a fairly complex skill, the most important aspect of it is paying attention to where you're going, because most people get lost simply because they haven't been paying attention to where they were going. Before we finish our discussion, we should mention that there are a couple subgroups within this list of survival priority equipment that are worth noting. Some of these equipment items are relatively easy to come up with out in nature. Others are much more difficult. For example, if we lost our digging stick while we were out there, we could easily make another one. But if we lost our knife, we would be hurting. The items that would be difficult to come up with would, in a wilderness survival situation, become our most valuable possessions. They are our clothing, bedding, a tarp if we had one, water container, fire starter, cook pot, cutting and chopping tools, and any containers we had. One last sublist of the survival priority equipment are things that get used up as we use them. These are water, hygiene items, fire-making materials, and food. We should be sure to learn how to replenish our supplies of these things from the things of nature, because no matter how much of any of these things you may have brought with you, sooner or later you would use them up.